Welcome back to another episode of the Sunday Stash here at episode number 11. And I'll actually started off with a little bit of a recap of some important events this week, as well as some of the things that I did this week. So I talked about Breaking Bad last week, and I actually was able to finish that whole series. Fantastic series. Got all the way to the end, and then I also ended up watching the movie El Camino. I have not gotten into watching Better Call Saul, but I'm probably going to end up watching that as well. Right now, I actually started watching Criminal Minds, so it's not too bad. I've watched maybe 3 or 4 episodes of it. It's just a different direction, I guess, than Breaking Bad. But anyway, I said it last week. Breaking Bad, absolutely phenomenal show. If you haven't watched it, get out there and watch it. So, all right, a quick wrap up of the week. Some of the more important events that happened. Time this week came out with their People of the Year, and they decided to choose Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, in which at first I really disagreed with that. I thought that it was a really stupid thing for them to do. Maybe not stupid, but I didn't think it was the right thing for them to do. But then again, I started actually, I looked it up, and I did a little bit of research on it, and I found that, Trump actually won Times Person of the Year back in 2016 after he won the election. So I kind of changed my mind on that. I don't think it's necessarily all that bad of a thing that they did it. It's not really breaking precedent. They chose Trump back in 2016, and realistically, he did nothing in 2016 other than, run a social media campaign. Joe Biden ended up not really doing much of anything this year either. So, the fact that they chose him isn't all that big of a deal, I guess. I do think that they should have picked someone else, especially with all the stuff that has gone on in 2020 with the pandemic and everything. They gave it to Biden and Harris, even though neither of them really did much of anything. Biden barely campaigned this year, and what he did, he campaigned from his basement. Most people didn't even go to any campaign rallies or anything like that. The only thing that you can really say that he did was push for masks, and that's kind of about it. I mean, obviously, it's not officially determined yet, but prospectively, he's won the election. So that's something that you can say that he's done, but Harris really also didn't do anything either. She bowed out of the election before they even reached her home state of California, and then she was just selected as Joe Biden's running mate. That's about it. So neither of them really did much of anything this year that warrants them being selected as the Time People or Person of the Year. Personally, what I think they should have done is they should have selected the healthcare workers. That's my opinion. I'm just a guy who, my opinion doesn't matter. They should have done that. And then realistically, if they were going to pick Biden-Harris, they could have picked Biden-Harris next year or the year after that and really just kind of said, and claimed that their policy, saved the U.S. I do think that, I know Trump was in the final running of it. I think that he does deserve some credit for, knocking out regulation and allowing the pharmaceutical companies pharmaceutical industry, I should say, to make the vaccine in realistically warp speed. He had that Operation Warp Speed, and that really helped out. Normally it takes much, much longer to get a vaccine like this. So I don't think that Dr. Fauci deserves, even, I don't want to say being considered for it, but he was part of that that the government faced in the beginning when they came out and essentially lied to the American public, saying, masks don't work. You don't need to use a mask. And then that was in an effort to get people, you know, to not go out and buy up all the masks and everything like that. So I understand why they did what they did. I don't agree with it, but I understand the reason that, I understand the reason that the government did that. Don't like it, but it is what it is. So with time, I do think that they grossly missed the mark on that one. They should have selected somebody else. But I feel like maybe they were pressured into selecting Biden and Harris. In addition to that, DoorDash, they did their IPO this week, as well as Airbnb. So DoorDash IPO'd at $102, and they closed their opening day at $174. I can't imagine that DoorDash will stay at that valuation. It really all depends on what happens with the pandemic. A lot of people are doing DoorDash right now because they can't physically go to restaurants or anything like that. So if we continue in the lockdowns, then maybe DoorDash will continue. But once things open up, I think that people are going to end up not using DoorDash as much as they are. There's also probably going to be less DoorDash drivers because if the pandemic ends or people start going back to work, because I feel like a lot of people are driving DoorDash or Uber and those jobs right now because they don't have regular jobs, because the government has continued to shut things down. Airbnb, they did their IPO immediately. I mean, they opened up at, the IPO was offered at $68, and they ended up closing that day, the first day, at $144, and then they closed on Friday at $139. I honestly think that they're going to end up continuing to kind of trend downward. I don't think they're going to have huge jumps downward, but they're going to continue to trend downward. The only thing, this is another one that it depends on what happens with the pandemic. If the pandemic stops, then, people can start traveling, and then they can start doing, they can start going into Airbnbs, and that industry can pick back up. But if the pandemic continues to shut people down and the government continues to shut stuff down, nobody's going to want to travel or anything like that. So, Airbnb is also, I feel like, kind of, they're hinged on what happens with this pandemic. So that's a bit of a weird thing. Personally, I stay away from IPO companies since they're always so volatile. I've watched a couple of them so far, and it wasn't really, I guess it wasn't really necessarily fun to watch, because you see the price shoot up the first few days and then it drops. I know that happened to Snapchat. I want to say that happened to a couple of the companies that I've seen. I don't remember all of them right now, but I know Snapchat, I do remember that one, where they opened up at like $28 and then they shot up to like $34, $35 immediately, and then dropped, and eventually they worked their way down to like $9 a share, and I think today they're maybe $50 a share. So it took 3 years or something like that for them to to turn everything around and actually get people excited about Snapchat, or maybe it just took them 3 years to figure out how to make money. So something ended up happening for them to to do it. So anyway, I personally I stay away from the IPOs. I don't want to do it. I could be wrong about all those companies, but I don't really know. I'm going to steer clear of them. Pfizer, they ended up getting the go-ahead from the FDA for its COVID vaccine. From what I understand, it should be available Monday, which is Monday the 14th, I guess. I know that's a good thing. Hopefully, if everything's good with it, then it gets issued to people, and then we can kind of start things back up again. Get the economy rolling. I do think that the issue with it is that the politicians, people like Harris and people like Biden, have, they've kind of sown so much distrust in this vaccine that there's a ton of people that are going to be scared to take it. So I think a lot of people won't want to get it, and I really 100% blame the politicians on that. Mainly the Democrat politicians who have come out and said that they don't trust it. Is if Donald Trump says to take it, then I'm not taking it. All he did was cut regulation. He wasn't in the lab actually doing it himself. So I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have with that. I do think that, politicians, if they want to show that it's safe, politicians should go ahead and get it first. I think Joe Biden is in the age group in which he needs it first, especially if he's going to be taking over as president in January. The dude can't just hide in the basement of, he can't just hide in the basement of the White House forever. He's going to have to be interacting with people. If he's going to be president, he's going to have to be out there. Donald Trump does it. Donald Trump did it all throughout the pandemic. So, I do think that politicians should be taking it first, and they should be taking the real thing, not like when Obama was, fake drinking Flint water. So, we'll see what happens with that. They're gonna try and get the vaccine out to people as best as they can, and we'll see how it goes. I'm sure that by this time next year, it'll we'll all be vaccinated and see what happens. So anyway, that's a wrap up of the week. My main topic this week that I wanted to talk about is the massive amount of people that are moving around the country, particularly people that are leaving places like California and New York, and then moving to places like Texas and Florida. It's not just those states, but I'll get into that. So a few years ago, I actually did some research on this topic. And I was talking to my girlfriend about all this stuff because we were talking about the state that we would ultimately like to live in. And, at the time, the place that we were living was it was a high cost of living area. And she mentioned Texas because she's from Texas. I'm from Virginia. And Virginia, high, not high, but it's got decent, taxes and everything, decently high taxes. So at first I told her, I said no on Texas at first, because I was like, man, it's way too hot down there. There's no way I'm going to be able to deal with, with the Texas heat. But as I started to do a little bit of research, I realized that Texas, they don't have any state income tax, which is pretty awesome. And the cost of living is fairly low. Even in those large cities down there, somewhere like Dallas. She's from Dallas, they actually have some really nice places to live around Dallas too. If you actually go and look and see what $500,000 gets you in somewhere like New York City or somewhere like California, even like Los Angeles, and then you go to Dallas. Granted, I don't know if you can necessarily compare the three cities, based on size and all that kind of stuff, but realistically, what you can get in Dallas or in the surrounding area of Dallas for $250,000 or even $500,000 is way more than what you can get in either New York or Los Angeles. In New York City or Los Angeles, you're talking even in Queens or the Bronx or something like that. You're paying $500,000 for a 2-bedroom house or something like that. It's pretty crazy. If you go to Zillow or anything like that, you can look and see like the prices of and what you're getting in those places. It's pretty crazy. The good thing about somewhere like Dallas is they do also have a lot of large companies that have their headquarters there. I think it's AT&T has its headquarters in Dallas. It's some phone company. I don't remember which one it is. There's a lot of people that have moved down to those areas, or a lot of companies that have made their headquarters there because it's such a great place to be. So I started to look into it, and I noticed that there were a lot of people that were leaving California and New York, and many of them were locating to places like Texas and Florida. That was a few years ago, and I don't necessarily remember the numbers. I actually tried to find the numbers because I thought I'd sent them to my girlfriend in an email to tell her, look, these are the trends and what's going on. But I do remember having the conversation, and I do remember that what it was California was losing people, and Texas was gaining, as well as New York was losing, and Florida was gaining. But here in 2020, it's kind of become more out in the open, I think. And the reason it's become out in the open is because of this pandemic that we've got going on, right? There's a lot of people, prominent people, that have come out and said, I'm getting the hell out of here. Not necessarily with just New York. The list that I have is mainly people that have decided to leave California. And I think the one that most people know about, because it was the one that was, most widely publicized, is Joe Rogan. He moved to Austin. He'd actually been talking about how bad California was, and from what I understand, he'd been thinking about moving for a while. He notes that it's way overcrowded. There's too many people around there. The traffic is atrocious. Economic despair, homelessness issues. I think one of the only things that he's talked about is the reason that he wanted to stay in Los Angeles because of the comedy club. I thought it was the store that he goes to, but they've closed that down, and that hasn't been allowed to open back up because of policy. But he can do his podcast from anywhere. Obviously, as many people have seen, if you do watch his podcast, some of the ones that he's done this year they're not in person. They're all over video chat. So they're actually able to do the podcast over the internet. After his $100 million deal from Spotify, I'm sure he really couldn't give a shit about anything else. He's still going to do his commentary on UFC. He's probably still going to do some comedy, but for the most part, the dude just got a $100 million deal to go exclusive with Spotify. So I don't think he's really worried too much about anything when it comes to anything other than his podcast. Another person, Kanye West, he actually is talked about, and evidently he has bought some land out in Cody, Wisconsin. He wants to move his Yeezy empire out there. There was an interview where he mentioned how relaxed the Wyoming or the Cody rules are in building and everything like that. So he wants to move everything out there. Not to mention the fact that Wyoming has no income taxes, so that's something good. Ben Shapiro, he's a conservative commentator. He's mentioned how he's moving to Nashville. He's going to move the Daily Wire to Nashville, at least. I think right now he's in Florida doing his show. But from what I understand, he is going to be relocating everything and moving to Nashville. And Nashville has they actually have no income tax, and they have a weird tax law where they actually charge, and it's supposed to go down, I think, this year, even more. But their only thing is that they charge taxes on dividends and investments. But they do have no conventional income tax. Another big one, Elon Musk. From what I understand, I don't know where it is that he's moving to in Texas, but he had this huge battle with Alameda County at the beginning of the pandemic, and he's going to end up moving his Tesla. He's building a Tesla factory down there, and I think what's going to end up happening with him is I think what he's going to do is he's going to move. Once he actually builds that factory down in Texas, I have a feeling that he's going to end up closing down the factory that he has in California. Or maybe they'll keep that, and they just will have fewer people that work there. They definitely don't want to continue to pay the high taxes and deal with all the ridiculous regulations that California has going on up there. I do think that the state taxes that Texas has is going to really help him out in his newfound super wealth if he decides to ever sell any of that Tesla stock. very, very prominent person, Donald Trump. He decided that he changed his home of record from New York, I think it was, to Mar-a-Lago, Florida. And he's going to end up probably moving there once he is out of office. He's been a New York resident for his entire life. We'll see what happens there. Once he's out of office, I'm sure he'll move there unless he decides, and he'll probably just go down there to play golf every single day unless he decides to run for office again in 2024. It's possible. I've heard people joke about the fact that he could end up just essentially doing campaign rallies for the next 4 years, which would be, I think it would be kind of funny if he did that. It would be pretty ridiculous, but it would be funny if he did campaign rallies for the next 4 years. Another guy, fairly popular YouTuber, Graham Stephan. He has a YouTube channel about investment. He'll talk about the stock market. He talks about taxes. He talks about real estate investing and everything like that. He picked Nevada. Nevada also has a zero income tax, and I think he's going to move to Las Vegas or somewhere in Nevada. And his idea is that he mentioned it's close enough to California because he still has all those properties out in California. So if he needs to do anything, it's a 3 to 4 hour drive or 3 to 4 hour flight to get out there to his properties and see what's going on. Oracle. They announced recently they would be moving their headquarters from San Francisco to Austin, Texas. So another Texas-bound company. The NASDAQ executives met with Governor Abbott. Governor Abbott's the governor of Texas, about moving to Texas from New Jersey. So that's a big implication there. Goldman Sachs Asset Management is also looking to move to Florida, which could possibly indicate a shift in the financial hub for the United States. They're probably moving to Florida for tax advantages, obviously. Some other companies, I guess Toyota Motor of North America, they left California. Charles Schwab, Kubota Tractor Corporation, they left. And then this next one, in my opinion, is all speculation. Nothing has happened yet, but I would not be surprised to see Disney move Disneyland to Nevada. It's a good idea. If you think about it, Nevada is a very tax-friendly state. It borders right next to California. Nevada just got the Raiders from California. They just stole the Raiders from Oakland. They have a professional hockey team in the Golden Knights, Las Vegas Golden Knights. I wouldn't be surprised to see if Disney was able to strike some sort of deal with, Las Vegas, the state, or with the governor, or I shouldn't say Las Vegas, the state, Nevada, the state, maybe the city of Las Vegas, or something with the governor, to get Disneyland out there. Give them some sort of huge tax write-off, or some sort of huge tax advantage for moving it out there. Las Vegas, their whole reason for existing is tourism. They have the casinos, they've got all that stuff, and what you decide to do is bring Disneyland out there, then I think what you're going to end up seeing is a huge influx in people. Now, I'm not really sure if they could handle that huge influx in people when it comes to their water situation, because I think that Las Vegas, there's really not any natural lakes or anything nearby, so I think they steal most of their water. I think that it's from the Colorado River, so we'll see what happens there, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Disney decide to move. They also have announced, Disney is California's third or second largest employer out there, and I want to say they announced that they're going to lay off 20,000 employees or 30,000 employees or something like that, either this year or leading into next year. So it's definitely pretty tough on Disney, and that's a really huge deal for California, especially since California is not allowing much to open up and much to start up. You notice a theme here, right? People are leaving these high tax areas, for low tax areas. And you must think, it's all just rich people who don't want to pay their fair share, right? These rich people are leaving. It makes them the enemy. The millionaires, they're not wanting to contribute, but it's not just millionaires, so it's not just 10 people. It's not just 20 people. It's not just a few people that are doing this. Here in a second, I'll cover the numbers for everybody else, but here's the top trends for the state-to-state movements. So number one, the highest trend is people moving from California to Texas, which is what I covered mostly up above. The next one, people are leaving New York and they're relocating to Florida. Then the next one is New York to California, California to Washington, and then California to Arizona. So people are leaving both California and New York, and they are going to Texas, Florida, Washington, and Arizona. Now, New York is losing a lot of people to California, so that's where their influx goes. So the biggest losers. Now, these numbers that I was able to find, they came from July of 2018 to July of 2019. So I was having a hard time finding, good numbers for this year, for 2020. But California lost 203,414 people. New York lost 180,649. Illinois, another place that has high taxes and high crime, they lost 104,986. And then New Jersey lost 48,946. I think that's the top 4 largest losers of net population. Then you have the biggest gainers in net population. Florida being number 1 at 133,910. Texas at 125,660. Arizona at 91,017 people. North Carolina 67,000. South Carolina 53,000. Georgia 49,000. And Nevada 43,000. So, why are these people leaving these states? One of the things that I was thinking is taxes, right? So, I'm going to read a couple of states off here that have the top tax rate. That's for the richest people that are going to be paying taxes in these states. They're likely going to pay this rate. Not everybody's going to pay this rate. And then I'm also going to list their sales tax as well. So California has a 13.3% tax rate, and then that's on income taxes. Then they have an 8.7 to 8.25 sales tax. New Jersey 10.75 income, and they have a 7% sales tax. New York has an 8.82 income tax and a 4% sales tax. Oregon is 9.9 on their income tax, and they actually have a 0% sales tax. Minnesota is 9.85 income tax and a 6.875 sales tax. Hawaii, 11% sales income tax and 4% sales. And then Illinois is a 4.95% income tax. I actually did not get the numbers for their sales tax. I must have missed that one. Now, states that do not have an income tax, you have Texas, Florida, Washington State, Tennessee, Nevada, Wyoming, and South Dakota. South Dakota and Wyoming, you're not really seeing a lot of people move there, mainly because of industry. There's not a lot to do there. There's no jobs. But Texas, they have a 6.25 sales tax. Florida, 6% sales tax. Washington State, 6.5% sales tax. Tennessee, 7% sales tax. Nevada, 6.85 sales tax. And Wyoming and South Dakota are both 4%. So, Texas and Florida both have no income tax. And they have moderately low sales tax. California, New York, and New Jersey all have very high income tax, and the only one that doesn't have a high, sales tax is New York. So, That's something to think about. An individual sales tax, really it could be higher. So in a place like Texas, right? If you're buying a lot of things, then your sales taxes are going to be higher. If you don't buy a lot of things and you save your money, then your sales taxes are going to end up being lower, obviously. So these numbers that I've talked about, these are just state income taxes. On top of that, you're going to have your federal taxes that people are going to end up having to pay on their income, and there's really no way of avoiding those income taxes, unless you decide to completely leave the country, or somehow you figure out how to beat the tax system, like kind of as Trump has done. So what's going on other than taxes? Why are people packing up and leaving some of these places? You can point towards the taxes, but that's not really the whole story. Some places have high taxes, but people aren't just leaving to go to places with no taxes. Some people are leaving and going to Arizona, although Arizona's income tax is only 3.65%, so it's not really zero, but a lot of people are moving to, a lot of people are leaving those places with high taxes. Arizona does gain a lot of people. I think a lot of Arizona's is really its proximity to California. The weather is nice, and realistically proximity to the border. So the immigration might factor into some of those numbers. But the majority of people are moving to places that have zero income tax. So I do think that is a factor. So California, people are leaving California. 1, high taxes. 2, huge cost of living. Housing out there is absolutely ridiculous. Things have skyrocketed out there, and a lot of it I think has to do with the growing regulations that California has implemented. And it makes it to where there's less availability, and realistically, supply and demand. If there's less houses and more people, then the cost of living increases. Traffic out there is terrible. They have a huge homelessness problem out there, not just in one city, but multiple cities. Los Angeles is really bad. You can literally just Google or Bing, if you want to Bing it. You can just search on the internet Los Angeles homelessness, and you can get pictures, you can get videos of this kind of stuff. People that are just living out in the streets. San Francisco, another one that's really bad. There's actually a shit map online. It's a map of San Francisco in which it shows you a location in which every single location in which I guess there's been a report of either a pile of human shit on the ground or a report of someone who is actively shitting on the ground. So, Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego. I personally, I've been there myself. I've seen that homeless problem myself. This was about 9 years ago. I visited San Diego for the first time. It was actually a fantastic place to be. The beaches are awesome. There's a ton of stuff to do. The city is really cool, and there's so much to see and experience out there. Especially for somebody who's from the East Coast, right? The weather is really awesome as well. The whole time I was out there, which was about 2 months, I noticed that almost every day it kind of looked like it was going to suck. You walk outside and it's kind of gloomy, but then 11 o'clock rolls around and boom, the sky clears up and the weather is awesome. It's not too hot. Nothing's really all that bad. It doesn't really rain that often over there in San Diego, so it's awesome. And I didn't really have a lot of bad things to say about San Diego other than the homeless problem. I had never seen so many homeless people in my entire life. I didn't have a car out there with me, so I had to take the bus everywhere or the train, which wasn't too bad actually. The public transportation system in San Diego is fantastic. It's really easy to understand, and it's really cheap. But near the hub in San Diego, near the baseball stadium where the Padres play, there were a lot of homeless people. I didn't really think anything of it at the time, in the year that I was there. and I think that was 2012, mid 2012 range. So, so that's about 8 years ago. Um, but I didn't think anything of it at the time. But as time went, I actually went back to San Diego a few years after that. I didn't really notice that much of a difference. But then I also went to Los Angeles that time as well and noticed there was a lot of homeless people up there. But as I've started to pay attention to politics, pay attention to just things that are going on, I, just like everybody else, have noticed that there's a huge homeless problem out in California. So huge sidebar there. There's a lot of people out there that are drug addicts, and I'm not talking about just marijuana or anything like that, because I don't think marijuana is the problem. It's opioids. I mean, opioids are an issue all over the country, but you have a lot of people in California specifically that are heroin addicts and everything like that. Another issue that California has is sanctuary cities. That allows for illegal immigration. I'm not sitting here and I'm not saying that immigration is bad, because I do think that immigration is a good thing. I think we need, for our population to grow and fight for diversity in the United States. It's a good thing. But I do think that there needs to be a process in which people can come into the United States in a legal way and be contributing members of society. So, sanctuary cities out in California, there's a lot of people in the United States, like American citizens, that don't necessarily agree with what local governments are doing. This past year there's a huge issue with wildfires out in California, and it's been a trend over the last few years. So there's that. An absolute gross mismanagement of this pandemic, in my opinion. Gavin Newsom and Garcetti have been doing essentially a terrible, terrible job managing this pandemic out there. And the reason I say that is because their default answer is, we'll just shut down. That's it. Just shut down. Just shut down. We're not gonna open anything back up. New York, people are leaving there. High taxes, high cost of living, absolute gross mismanagement of the pandemic. And this is not all of New York. This is just mainly New York City. New York City kind of encompasses, because it's there at the south, it encompasses New Jersey as well. Illinois, it's freezing cold in Illinois. I've been there once or twice, and I've been there in the wintertime, and it's very, very cold in Illinois, especially in Chicago, which is the place that I had been. Violence in Illinois is terrible as well. They're in the top 10 for violent crime. But realistically, I mean, politicians aren't doing anything up there to do anything about it. I feel like they look at it and they say, well, it's no big deal. They're all just gang members and they deserve it. That's my assumption of the way the politicians are looking at their crime issue in Chicago, because they obviously haven't done anything or can't do anything with it. Cost of living is also fairly high in Illinois. Hawaii is another one where they've lost a decent amount of people. It's not super bad, but Hawaii also, they've lost a lot of people, and that's mainly due to the high cost of living. It costs a lot of money to transport things out there, and it's just tough. New Jersey, cost of living. The funny thing about New Jersey is you hear about this thing called exit tax, which is kind of weird. And there's ways of getting around it, and I'm no tax expert, and I tried to read this to understand it as best as I could. But you pay 8.97% of the profit from selling your home, or 2% of the value of the home, or of the total sale of the home, whichever is higher. Obviously, there's ways of getting out of that, and there's ways of not paying it, and I couldn't really find anything that said, like, if you're just a person who, if you didn't sell a house, if you were renting, I don't think that they're actually going to charge you a tax to leave the state. So calling it an exit tax is a bit of a disingenuous thing, but still, nonetheless, is a high cost of living up there. They have a very high tax base as well. I think it was 10% or something, somewhere in that range, 10.75% taxes up in New Jersey. I did actually read an article where California was thinking about adding something similar to that on the people that are leaving their state. Um, with all that being said, it kind of sounds like I'm sitting here and I'm just talking trash about a handful of states. I do think that it is important to note that it's not just highly populated blue states that are losing all these people by the thousands. West Virginia is also losing people as well. That one is, honestly, it's mostly due to the lack of work in the state. West Virginia, they account for a small portion of the people that are moving. But it's less to do with policy and more about the fact that there's no work. That's the very poor area of the Appalachian Mountains, however you want to pronounce it. Louisiana is also on the list of red states that have lost people, as well as Alaska. But both of those are, in the same category as West Virginia. Lack of job opportunity, but Louisiana, I think, is number one on most dangerous states in the country in the United States. So there's a wide variety of reasons, that people are leaving their home states to go to other places. Not every state is going to be the same. There are trends, and if we look at those trends, we might be able to make some changes, to each state, and maybe change some policy to help each one of these states keep their people. So you really never know what happens until you make those changes. So we'll see what happens if anybody ever really notices any difference. This will be a bit of a longer closing than I normally do. So in closing, I think that there is always going to be people that are moving into California from other states, because they want to be surrounded by the environment. The same goes for New York. Friends was done in New York, and anytime anybody watches Friends, they think, I want that kind of environment. I want to work at Bloomingdale's. I want to do these things. And you want that lifestyle, right? So California, places like Los Angeles and New York City, they both offer that lifestyle that people want. And there are a lot of young YouTubers that are moving out to Los Angeles to be surrounded by other YouTubers. They're creating these houses. I think they're called hype houses, where a bunch of them move in together and live together, and they basically just create content. Personally, I think it's an absolutely terrible idea, but that's the way society is. Eventually, I think that those people will get older and they'll realize how much money they're spending on taxes, and eventually look around and come to the realization that they are essentially getting nothing for the money they're paying to the government. They might not be that might not be true for the influencers, since their fame is kind of built on the environment. They wouldn't grow if it were not for the environment. But as people realize that these high taxes and lockdown heavy states are complete messes, they will leave. The people that can leave will get out of there. Middle class, upper middle class, the higher, the high class and stuff like that. Those people. It is important to understand that there's a reason that Texas and Florida are attractive to places for people to move to. They have those low taxes. Here in 2020, they opened back up, and less people are going out of business and, or having being jobless in those states. And I pulled up some statistics for a couple of these states. I'll cover a few. Texas, back in January, they had a unemployment rate of 4.5%. February it went to 2.5%. March it went to 4.7%. April it went up to 12.8%, and then 13.0% in May. And then eventually it started to fall back down once they decided to open back up. And according to the statistics that I have here, what I'm looking at only goes to September. But they are at 8.3. I would imagine that they're actually a little bit lower than that currently. If we go and look at Florida, and see their numbers. They started in January with a 2.8. They actually rose a little bit, and in May they had a 12.9. And at their high point, April, Florida had a 12.9, and then May, their high point was 13.7. And now, at this point in September, they have fallen to 7.6% unemployment, which is pretty good. Now we'll go and we'll look at the two places that have been mainly putting their people into Texas and Florida. So California, they started in January with a 3.9% unemployment. They actually went down in February, and then they ballooned up to 15.5 in April and 16.4. And they've reduced it a little bit to the point in September they were at 11%. And I did actually look at numbers. So California currently in December is 9.3%. So they're not doing great, but they're doing better than what they were earlier in the year. Now, New York, when we look at New York's numbers, in January they were 3.8, which not too bad. Then they went to 3.6, 4.5 in March. In April, and then no, actually that was March. 14.5 in April, 14.5 in May, 15.7 in June, and they actually hit their peak in July of unemployment. And they've actually started to fall a little bit, and they're sitting at 9.6 currently. They had 9.7 back in September, so they really haven't made much progress since September. So they're not back to their January numbers. So that's just 4 of the states. Nevada is actually sitting at 12% unemployment right now, but I think a lot of that has to do with their casinos and their tourism industry. That's basically the only thing that they have is tourism. Nevada hit their peak unemployment back in April at 28.3%. So they're doing pretty rough up there, out there. So it's tough for them. But I do think a lot of that has to do with tourism and everything like that. And one of the other things about these, right? So you have Texas, you have Florida, who are doing really well, right? And you have California, New York. Nevada is an outlier because of tourism, but you have Texas and California doing really well. In one of my other episodes where I talk about the difference between red and blue states, I covered one of the things where I talked about how black people in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio are doing far better than black people in many of the other states. And that's one of the things, right? When we're looking at these unemployment numbers, Trump has always said, lowest black unemployment ever, and that's definitely something that I think that he can put on his resume that as president he ended up doing. But that's something to also think about, right? I would say that political policy, is the reason for much of this, right? A lot of the reasons why these unemployment numbers are the way that they are. And the big thing, in my opinion, to remember with this is when it comes time to vote, remember, there's reasons why you left California, and there's reasons why you left New York. I think the funny saying is, don't California my Texas. I'm not from Texas or anything like that, but, keep Florida and keep Texas the way that they are. Don't come in and start implementing extra taxes because you feel as though, you're going to end up being able to do social programs and everything like that. Texas and Florida, they run well as they are, right? They don't have a bunch of corrupt politicians who have decided to come in like California does and do stupid stuff like go to French Laundry after they're telling people not to go out and have, get-togethers. Although I think it's the mayor of Austin did decide to do that, but I think the mayor of Austin's a Democrat, but he is from Texas, so I don't know how to really gauge that. But don't move down to those places and bring your political ideology. I mentioned in my other episode, some of these cities have been Democrat controlled for years, right? The states have been Democrat controlled for years, and the cities have been Democrat controlled for years, and they continue down a bad path of high poverty rates and high homelessness, which in the end, realistically, disproportionately affect minorities. So understand when you're moving to these places, to understand the reasons why. What are you fleeing? Why are you leaving a place to go to somewhere else? Are you leaving because you don't want to pay the high taxes anymore? And if that's the case, then don't move to somewhere like Texas and then vote politicians in who are going to end up making the changes and implement those same policies of the state that you just fled. So that's something to think about when you're talking about moving from all these other places into other what would be considered better states to live. So anyway, that's all I have for today. Leave me a comment on what you think about this mass exodus from California and New York. Is there any saving California or New York from the policies that are ruining them currently? Be sure to subscribe for more episodes weekly.